Good evening, everybody, and you're very welcome to the AIRC grading review. I'm Tony, your chairman, and David will be giving the presentation in a few moments. And just to let you know before we start that this presentation is being recorded. So we'll invite you to ask questions in the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen at the end of the presentation. So just to say that your grading review committee undertook to look at the grading within the organisation. The committee was made up of Sean Doran, Anne Bloomer, Faith Ponsonby, the late Agnes Gibbons-White, and myself. Our initial findings was that the model that was being used is good, and of course if it's not broken we don't need to fix it. However, there were some thoughts that we should look at how we could make the whole thing a little more user-friendly and tidy it up. We don't really have all the answers, and some of them will have to be looked into a little bit more detail when we sit down to putting the rules together for 2022. So I'd like to thank the committee for their work, which they did very well and was very understanding, and there were also some findings sought from our stakeholders, which David will inform you about in a little bit. So we'll hand you over to David now, who will take you through the presentation.
Thanks, Tony, and good evening to everyone. I suppose just to start with this, as Tony said, the review group included 4 instructors and a rider representative who were involved in showjumping as judges, dressage judges, course designers, technical delegates for cross country, and they gave a broad representation of the various activities which we have within the association. So the review process then included involvement with all of our key stakeholders within our association, including our affiliated clubs and their members. It also included our various committees as well. And the process included a club survey, which was completed in the 4th quarter of 2019, and with a member survey completed in the 1st quarter of 2020. Now, unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic delayed some progress in this regard. But so to begin, I'm just going to give you some of the key findings from our member survey. So 316 members responded to this particular survey, and of those, 25% said the current system was fair and user-friendly. So if only 25% said it was fair and user-friendly, 75% said it wasn't. 66% want to be able to compete in multiple classes at shows where possible. 63% would like to be able to try and compete in competitions higher than their current grade permits. 63% said their clubs should be able to approve upgrade applications, and 60% said the club grading officer is the appropriate person to grade members within their club. So throughout this presentation, we're going to look at the basics. This is why members are graded, how they're graded, and so on. We'll look at the proposed changes that we're looking to introduce, and then we'll look at the role of the club grading officer and also the role of the regional grading officer. So I suppose we'll start first of all with the basics and just go through the process as it stands, so people are aware of it. So the first thing to look at is, why do we grade members? Well, we grade members in 3 disciplines such as dressage, showjumping, and cross country, so that they're not asked to compete to do anything which is above or below their level of expertise. It's also to standardise competitions throughout the country with the object of placing as many riders as possible on as equal a footing as possible. So it's basically to create a level playing field for everyone and to standardise the competition so people are competing against people of the same ability. It should also be remembered that the rider's ability is graded rather than the horse in our organisation. Okay, so we'll take a look at the grades. We are all I assume at this stage, very familiar with the grades that we have from primary right up to advanced open. 6 levels that we have, and under the proposals, we will remain with 6 levels. So currently, who's responsible for grading people? Well, it's the grading of an individual member is the responsibility of the club committee. They're ultimately responsible, and if the club has a grading committee, it's their responsibility. And they grade their members with the advice where appropriate of a recognised instructor. The onus is on the committee to grade their riders fairly and in a sporting manner. And it's important to remember that the member themselves do not grade themselves. So the grading of members is the ultimate responsibility of each club committee, that they grade their members fairly and in a sporting manner. So we'll take a look at some of the basic grading rules. These are rules which currently exist. So the first one there, a rider generally may not have a grade span of more than 1 different grade between disciplines. So by that we mean they can't be advanced intermediate for dressage, advanced primary for show jumping, and intermediate for cross country. That's not permitted. Okay, the cross country grade must not be higher than the show jumping grade at any level. So the cross country grade has to be the same or lower than your show jumping. Where the show jumping and cross country grades are 2 grades lower or more than the dressage grade, the 2 jumping grades must be the same. They must be equal. So for example, if they're open in dressage and they're advanced primary in show jumping, their cross country would also have to be advanced primary. Primary riders are not graded for cross country, and their show jumping grade cannot be higher, obviously there. The primary riders may upgrade in dressage without changing their show jumping grade. However, they will not be graded in cross country. So that's just some of the basic grading rules, and those basic rules will stay as they are as we progress. So how are members graded? Well, each member should be assessed when they join a club, and this can be performed by the club grading officer in certain circumstances. So first of all, reviewing the information provided on the membership application form. So whatever's on their application form, if they outline that they're competing SGI or Dressage Ireland or Eventing Ireland or whatever they may be doing, we take on board all of that information, look at it. You can then go online and check online databases for the performance record, such as Dressage Ireland, Eventing Ireland, Show Jumping Ireland, and any other relevant databases that may be out there to ascertain as to what level they have been competing at, and they should be graded accordingly. The third one there is assess the rider to lesson. We don't expect grading officers to do that, but they can be advised by an instructor to advise their main committee. So that's essentially how members are graded at the moment. If we take a look at the eligibility criteria, that's kind of outlined in the rule book, and you can all take a look at that in your own time. I think most should be familiar with that at this point in time anyway, but members should note that their activities in other equestrian organisations, such as the Olympic affiliates, can have an impact and does have an impact on their eligibility for a grade. And this may result in them being no longer eligible for a grade and having to upgrade. So by that we mean, if you're out there actively competing in Show Jumping Ireland competitions and you're jumping a metre consistently, and you're only graded at intermediate level with us, well then there's an imbalance there. And that needs to be rectified. For example, if you're graded, as I just said, if you're graded intermediate and you're competing in a metre, you're no longer eligible for intermediate. If you're in SGI competitions jumping week in, week out at a metre, you're not eligible for intermediate and you have to upgrade to advanced intermediate under the current system. And this is obviously to ensure fairness in our competition so that you're competing against people of the same ability. So if we take a look at the changes that we're proposing, these I've broken up into some categories here. So the first of all is the grades. This is how the grades will be viewed from here on in if these changes are adopted. We'll look at the competition structure, what's being proposed, and also the checks and balances as to how we will keep tabs with the new changes, such as the results database and upgrades there. We'll look at the club grading officer, the regional grading officer, and also the process for changing your grades. So on this slide here, on the left-hand side, you'll see the current grade, so primary. So what does primary become in dressage? It becomes ORC P1. ORC is just riding club. P stands for preliminary. And in the jumping, you'll see it's metric, so it's ORC 70. So with the dressage, primary, advanced primary, and intro will become preliminary 1, preliminary 2, preliminary 3. They ride preliminary tests in dressage. So therefore preliminary becomes their grade. And because we have 3 categories of preliminary, it's P1, P2, P3. Advanced intermediate ride novice tests, so they become novice, RCN. Open ride elementary tests, so they're RCE. And advanced open ride medium tests, so they become RCM. The M is just short, obviously, medium, elementary, novice, and preliminary, as I said. In the jumping, it's a little bit more straightforward. It becomes metric. It reflects the height you're jumping. And the reason for the changes in the name is to make it more, I suppose, transparent and easier for people to know what they're competing at and what they're eligible to compete at. So, you know, if it's a novice test you're riding in Dressage Ireland, well, it equates to advanced intermediate. So your grade will be known as N or novice from here on in Dressage. So just it follows the other organizations and brings it more into line with that. So if we look at the new competition structure, so we're saying significant changes are required to the competition structure to allow greater flexibility across the system to modernize and streamline the competitions. So this is what our members kind of want. They want greater flexibility to choose what sort of competitions they can enter. So we're saying competitors have a greater choice of competitions under this system to enter based on their current grade, as currently members are very restricted in their choice. We look at newcomer competitions introduced at club and regional level. In dressage, for example, these could be walk trot tests, while in show jumping, these could be competitions with fences no higher than 60 centimeters. They can be lower, they can be cross poles, depending on the needs or requirements at your club or regional level. Members will now be able to compete in competitions 1 grade up from their current grade at club and regional level only. Members will now be able to compete in a lower competition where these classes are provided. The novice horse, green horse, special S classes are all to be withdrawn, and we don't see any need for sportsman classes, as they'll be accommodated in these new lower competitions, which we will refer to as open in a short while. Okay, so prizes and rosettes are to be awarded across all competitions. There should be no discrimination in that respect, and there should be no restriction on the number of classes a member wishes to compete in, depending on obviously the discipline and subject to the welfare of the horse. So if it's eventing, well, obviously the horse can only go once in that. If it's hunter trials, the horse can only go twice. And then in dressage and jumping, it obviously will depend on what's happening there. So on this slide, we're going to take a look at the basic competition. So if you're running a show jumping show, this is basically your schedule. On the left-hand side, you'll see competition, RC 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120. Those are your classes, effectively, replacing primary, advanced primary, inter, advanced inter, open, and advanced open. So in the RC 70 class, it's open to primary riders, and that's straightforward. Again, the RC 80 class will be open to primary and advanced primary, because a primary rider can try up a level, as we've said, so they can actually enter the RC 80 class. If you go into the RC 90, it's open to advanced primary and intermediates. Again, you can try up a level, and it works down the system. You can see the same in the RC 100, the 110, and the 120. So aside from those kind of basic competitions, there are additional competitions which you can run. And I mentioned the newcomers class there a short while ago. So that can be run if there's demand for it in your club or in your region. These new open classes, as we're referring to them, these effectively allow riders to compete at a lower level. Okay. So in an RC 70 class, you can see that it's open to primary, advanced, primary, inter, advanced, inter, open, and advanced open riders. So for example, if you have a new horse, you're an intermediate rider, currently intermediate, and you want to try out your new horse in a class, you can go along to a show and you can compete in an RC 70 open class, where the open class is being run at that height. Again, the same happens in the RC 80. The RC 80 open, that's open to advanced primaries, inters, advanced inters, opens, and advanced opens, and so on. And the RC 90 is the same. You can also run RC 100s, 100 open or 110 open if there's a demand for it. I would say the demand would normally be towards the lower heights, particularly the 80s and 90s in the organization. But again, it's up to yourselves. The system will allow those classes to be run. So we'll move on to the next one. We're looking at eventing. So again, the same thing here. If you look on this slide, on the left-hand side, you'll see competition. So you have your RC 80, RC 90, RC 100, RC 110. Those are your basic competitions. and they replace the classes which we currently run. So you can see what's going on here. So for example, if we look at the RC 90 class, you can see that if you're advanced primary at the moment, you'll be eligible. You can then try out that class at 90, as can intermediates and so on. The same for the 100 and the 110 class. Again, it gives flexibility. So members will be able to try the height that they're graded at or a level up at club and regional level. At national level, just bear in mind that our classes, you'll only be able to enter where you're graded. They are mainly championships at national level. So they will be just at your graded heights, and it's due to capacity issues that we may not have capacity to take entries at a higher level. So again, additional competitions here, for example, your clubs or regions might decide to run an RC 80 open class or an RC 90 open class. Again, these will replace all those other classes such as Green Horse, Novice Horse, Special S, and all the rest of them. It brings it into more streamlined across all of our competitions, and it allows everyone to compete at a lower level. So for example, if you're currently an open rider and you have a young horse, you could take it out in an RC 80 open class if you wish, or the 90 open class, depending on how the horse is going for you. So if we take a look at the dressage competitions, these again are your basic competitions here. So you see your RC Prelim 1, Prelim 2, Prelim 3, your novice, elementary, and medium. Same principles apply as the other ones. You know, if it's a Prelim 2 test, your primary riders can go along and try a level up and so on through the heights. This hopefully will also not alone allow greater flexibility for members, but it should also generate additional entries for show organisers and clubs when they're running events to make them more viable in that respect. So when you're heading to a show, you have greater options to take part in additional classes. Again, the additional competitions in dressage, so you could run the newcomers class, you could run a Prelim 2 open or a Prelim 3 open class, or a novice open or an elementary open class. And again, the open classes allow the higher grades to compete at a lower level. It also allows, for example, if your show is running a Prelim 3 class and a Prelim 3 open class, your intermediate riders could effectively enter both of those and ride 2 tests rather than just riding the 1 test. So it's giving greater flexibility for competitors, and also hopefully generating additional entries for shows. So with all of this, we need some checks and balances to make sure that we can monitor how people are competing and obviously moving through the system as they should do. So we have a number of initiatives to assist with the monitoring of the performance of members. So you can see there we have a results database, permitted activities, and then compulsory upgrade. So those 3 things we'll take a look at now. So with the results database, we're not proposing anything too fancy here. It's just going to be a Google Sheet perhaps with a record of results of all the interclub competitions. So each region will appoint a coordinator to ensure results are returned to our office, and show organisers should return those within 7 days of the show taking place. And we will provide obviously a template for the results to be provided, so it can be uploaded pretty straightforward, and access to that will be restricted to the regional grading officers, the results coordinator, and our office. Now, I mentioned permitted activities a moment ago, and by permitted activities, what we mean is if you are taking part in the yellow box there, you'll see AIRC competitions. Members who compete at one level higher within the association can do so at club and interclub level or regional level, but must upgrade if placed 5 or more times within the previous 12-month period. So if you're trying a level up and you're placed 5 or more times within the previous 12 months, then you have to upgrade to the next level. Okay. If you're competing in unaffiliated competitions, by unaffiliated we mean Show Jumping Ireland, Eventing Ireland, Dressage Ireland, or others. We just list those there as an example. Members who compete at one level higher in any of those competitions can do so, but they must upgrade if they competed 5 or more times within the previous 12-month period. So there is a difference. So in these competitions, you only have to compete 5 or more times within the previous 12 months, and you will be required to compulsory upgrade. Okay, if they compete more than, however, if you compete more than one level higher, you can be compulsory upgraded straight away. So for example, by that, if we mean if you're currently graded at 90 centimeters with us and you're jumping a metre 10 in Shoujibing, Ireland, well then there's a discrepancy of 2 levels there. So that would be an automatic compulsory upgrade up to the next level. Okay, compulsory upgrades. Let's have a chat about those. So what we're talking about here is where a member has consistently exceeded the permitted thresholds for a grade, the regional committee may compulsory upgrade a member. So in order to do that, they must first of all establish the facts. They must gain evidence to back up that, and then they must outline the reasoning as to why they want to upgrade the person. So it's just to make sure that they have evidence. It's based on evidence, and there's a reasonable explanation as to why they want to ask the person to upgrade. But they must also seek approval from the office in order to do that. And the reason we're saying that is it's just to make sure that we can just take a look at the evidence that you have and the reasoning that you have and make sure that it fits in. And if it's all okay there, well then the compulsory upgrade can go ahead. So the region cannot issue a compulsory upgrade without approval from our office, okay? And the change will take effect immediately, and there will obviously be an appeals process open to them if they want to appeal that decision. So in terms of changes of grades, what we're saying under these proposals is that upgrades will be approved by the members' club committee. They'll no longer go to regional committee, and that can be in consultation with the grading officer. Downgrades will continue to require approval. It'll be from the Regional Grading Advisory Committee, and it will be based on performance metrics, and I'll discuss those in a moment, from recent activities within the organisation. Downgrades or grading changes will no longer be discussed at regional meetings, but between the regional and club grading officers once performance metrics have been reviewed. So what are performance metrics? Well, this is what we mean by these. The rider must compete in an open class on 2 separate occasions within 2 months of their application being submitted. So if someone's looking to downgrade, they have to compete in 2 open classes on 2 separate occasions within 2 months of their application being submitted. So if it's a dressage competition, for example, the judge must be a Dressage Ireland listed judge. Okay, a review of the members' performance results will be undertaken, and we'll do that looking at the results in AIRC competitions that we have on the database that will be created. And we'll also take a look at any external results, such as those on the Olympic affiliates databases that they have. So the onus will then be placed on the individual to attain metrics before a downgrade will be considered. So that's kind of what we mean by performance metrics. So the onus goes back on the rider to show us why they want to downgrade. So we'll take a look at the club grading officer. The club grading officer must obviously be a member of an affiliated club, and they must have either of the following of these. So they must be an instructor with a BHS AI or HSI level 1 qualification or a higher qualification at minimum. Or if they don't have that, they must be graded at intermediate level currently within the organisation in dressage at minimum. So they must have either of those 2. The second thing is we're saying that they can't double job within the club because there will be enough for this role on its own. They'll have to sign an annual declaration when registering the club annually. That's to say that they are familiar with the rules and agree to uphold them within the club. And then they will also have to attend a compulsory biannual training webinar regarding the role of the club grading officer. So some of the responsibilities of the grading officer within the clubs will be, first of all, that they should understand the grading rules and criteria and be able to align an individual to a relevant grade. So that's just understanding the rules and being able to apply them so that members are correctly graded within their club. They need to be consistent and fair in how they apply the grading rules and look at the grading criteria. They'll be there to support and liaise with the club committee. They'll liaise with other club grading officers in the region if they need to. They'll review the grading of members within their club when required. They'll review any change of grade applications from individuals within their club and consult with their regional grading officer if required. They'll also liaise with the regional grading officers regarding disputes of grading of individuals within their club when required. They'll liaise with the regional secretary to ensure notification of approvals are submitted to our office in a timely fashion. They'll liaise with their office, obviously, if required, and the last point there is identify success, and that's quite an important one. I suppose all of us in any voluntary capacity, we should be looking out for people to replace us. Nobody wants to volunteer for ever and ever and ever. So it's important to identify people who can take on the role should you decide to step down from it, so we have a successor. And obviously to provide guidance and support to that individual. So if we take a look at the regional grading officer, then it's similar but slightly different. In this instance, obviously the regional grading officer must be a member of an affiliated club. It goes without saying. And they must attain either of the following here. So again, it's the same. They must be an instructor with a BHSAI or HSI level 1 qualification or higher at minimum, or else they must compete at advanced or be graded at advanced intermediate level in dressage at minimum. Again, they can't double job within the region because their role will be sufficient on its own without having to do other responsibilities within the region as well. Again, if you look at the responsibilities, some of these are very similar. So the first one is obviously to have an understanding of the grading criteria and rules and be able to align an individual to a relevant grade, and to be consistent and fair in the application of the grading criteria and rules of the association. They'll be there to support and liaise with the club grading officers in the region, to review the grading of members of clubs within the region if required as well, to review any change of grade applications from clubs in the region, and to consult with the club grading officer if necessary. Obviously to ensure that there's a results database and the regional coordinator is keeping that up to date and it's maintained regularly. They'll liaise with the regional grading officers regarding disputes of the grading of individuals where required. They'll liaise with the regional secretary to ensure notification of approvals for change of grades are submitted to national office on time. And they'll also liaise with myself in the office regarding any grading matters that arise throughout their term. So in conclusion, as Tony mentioned at the start there, I mean, there is obviously great appetite for change, and that was identified with the feedback which was received to the current system to introduce greater flexibility to allow members to compete at various levels within the system. And we hope what's proposed allows that in a fair and reasonable manner for everyone. There are many benefits for doing this, as it will give members more choice while increasing entries at shows, and that's what we're hoping we'll do here. We want to bring in more people, we want to increase participation. The proposed changes will introduce flexibility for members, but it must be supplemented by greater monitoring and implementation of the grading rules, and the introduction of clear and measurable criteria, particularly when it comes to change of grade. So as we mentioned the performance metrics earlier, the onus goes back on the rider. These changes will fundamentally change how we operate as an organization. You know, I don't think we've had as big a change since the organization came about. But again, if the clubs adopt this, we'll see. So we don't propose to have all the answers tonight, as Tony mentioned. We need to sit down and write the rules if clubs want to go ahead with this change. But I suppose it does provide a solid foundation which will allow the association to meet the needs of our members while allowing for growth in the years ahead. I mean, it does provide a good foundation for this, and it's something to build on, and obviously it can be reviewed and tweaked as we need to in the years ahead. So look, on that note, thank you everyone for taking part.
That's it. So thank you very much. I hope that you found it somewhat interesting, that it will be useful and beneficial to our members, and it will allow our organization to grow and develop into the years to come. And just to hope that you will all keep safe. There were 3,700 new cases of COVID identified today, which looks like that the numbers are going up. So please do keep washing your hands, use your face masks, and keep your distance. Thanks everyone.